So we are going to, as you're here for final tips and tricks for, and really looking at final review and what to look for AP Lit, and really and also let me go back and do that plug too. Think Fiveable, follow us. If you aren't following us on social media, why are you not doing that? Do it. It's free. Everything's free. Everything can be looked at later for free. It's pretty great. All right. That being said, let's get to what the actual 2020 exam is and what you should do to review for it. So here's the breakdown of what we're going to be talking about today, is looking at what the 2020 exam looks like versus what the 2020 exam would have looked like. And then I'm going to talk about things you can do the weeks before and how to practice and what to do for really preparing for that Q2 question. Going to look at what you should do maybe the week before. You can do some things the week before, like you could do it now, but I just say these things should be done at the very latest the week before, and then finally the day before and day of the exam. You go ahead and go to your cram session. I'll still be here, and you can always check us out later. Tomorrow, this will be up 24 hours later, so thank you for popping in. All right, let's get to it. So here we go. So let's talk about the exam a little bit and what has changed. So this may be hammered into your head a lot, and for some of you, hopefully it is, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes your teacher does not necessarily get to it. So here are the changes in the exam and what it's going to look like. So your exam is now Wednesday, May 13th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you're living on the East Coast, that's going to be your time. Make sure you're checking the correct time for your actual time zone. And then the makeup is on June 2nd. So you can choose to take the exam either on Wednesday, May 13th, so that's about 2.5 weeks from now, or you can take it June 2nd. My recommendation, I'm going to say this a couple of times, is to go ahead and register for that May 13th exam just in case something happens. You can always decide to take it June 2nd later on, but you can't decide, crap, I should have taken this earlier. So try to see if you can get it done the 13th, and then just make sure that that's kind of your safety net there. The exam is going to be 45 minutes plus 5 minutes to submit your essay. So that gives you actually a little 5 minutes extra to do one essay. So that's kind of nice. And then 5 minutes to actually get the thing submitted, which is pretty nice too. So they make sure you get that technology time to do that. It's only going to be a Q2. So I'm going to talk today about how to prepare for that Q2. And hopefully you've been doing a little bit of that in your classes and with other streams, but today's really just kind of the basics of doing that and more general advice. And you can choose to type or handwrite and send a picture of your response. So again, a theme of this will be whatever you're most comfortable with is what you should go for the exam. So if you've been handwriting all year and you're like, typing is going to make me super nervous, handwrite it, take pictures, send it in. If typing is like, thank goodness they don't have to read my atrocious handwriting and I can maybe spell a little bit better when I'm typing and see it better, then typing might be for you. You just do whatever you're most comfortable with. And finally, you can use a computer, tablet, or smartphone, well, not finally, to do your exam. So whatever is going to give you the best reception and whatever you're the most comfortable with is what you get to use. It's also open book and open note, which is not as vital, I think, for AP Lit as it would be maybe for a history exam or something like that. So yeah, so that's the breakdown kind of the exam and what the changes have been. Again, if you got questions, put them in the question box, but we're very small today. So, all right, and talk a little bit more. There's also something else I wanted to say, just making sure it's probably been hammered into your head too, that as far as making it open book, open note, and I guess as far as I know that because I had a question from a student of mine that was like, oh my gosh, what if my teacher thinks, or what if the College Board thinks I'm plagiarizing? Because they do have plagiarism, what do you call it? Programs in place, like when you're typing your essay. She's worried that she's going to get too good before the exam. Don't worry about that. It's really just a matter of, if your writing is so different from what you normally do, it looks like your writing is like what you do versus, oh my gosh, this looks like it could be published in a professional paper, and that's not normally how you write, that's the red flag. It's not like, oh, you've improved drastically, because there's a difference between drastic change and that's not your writing. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. It's really just do your best. Don't try to do anything besides just writing your essay. Don't cheat. Not that I think any of you would do that, but just letting you know that. Okay. And if you got questions about that too, I can answer it. So the tasks, and this is literally what they say on College Board. you're going to analyze a passage. So this is going to be a Q2. You're going to read and analyze a passage of prose fiction of 500 to 700 words. So you've been probably doing some practice Q2s. If you haven't, you've in the whole year, you've probably been doing them for the last couple weeks. And you are, again, I'm not going to read these word for word because these are on College Board, but just letting you know, I'll tell you why I'm posting this in just a second. So you're responding to the prompt of the thesis that presents that defensible interpretation. So that's your thesis point. So as long as your thesis is defensible, as in someone could refute it or they could agree with it, you get that thesis point. Unless it's like totally off base, like it's not on topic, then you probably won't get that. But as long as it's on topic and is defensible. You want to select and use an evidence for support a line of reasoning. So that's what you've been doing. You're just taking evidence from the text in front of you and using it to support your thesis, explaining that, and then using as much appropriate grammar as possible. So that's what they're looking for. And the reason why I put that on there as a repeating thing is because this is the kind of stuff, even if you haven't been doing a Q2 all year, I know that a lot of my teacher friends and a lot of my students, they say, I haven't been doing Q2s. I don't feel like I'm prepared for this. But if you look at the tasks that you're doing, you have been doing this in class. You have been writing thesis statements. You have been writing essays. You have been looking at literature in a way that makes you analyze it. So the tasks that they're asking you to do are things you already have been doing. It just might not be as formally. You've maybe been practicing the poetry more, or you might be practicing the Q3 more, but it's still what you've already been doing. So this is also a theme. Breathe throughout this process. You're going to be great. Okay, so those are your tasks. So let's actually talk about how you can prepare. And these may be some ways you're already preparing. So number one, my first, and this is just a series of tips here, is study short stories like a boss. So you're going to have, Q2 is a piece of a story. So it's going to be an excerpt probably from a novel or a play. But one of the ways that you can help yourself, and maybe you've been doing this throughout the year, I know that when I would teach AP classes, that this is what I would start with. I'd make them read short stories and I'd make them analyze the crap out of them. So that's what I mean by studying short stories like a boss. So you want to read and reread short stories because you're going to get that short excerpt. So if you're used to reading short pieces all as one thing, like as in one entity that you're looking at, not as a whole novel, then you might be better prepared to take that Q2. So you want to stretch and flex this short story analysis muscle. You want to analyze the crap out of them and read them and reread them and get used to doing that. Even though Q2 is an excerpt from a longer novel or play, you're still only analyzing what's given. So if you happen to even like recognize what the Q2 story or play is, you don't want to analyze that full play. You're just analyzing just the chunk that they give you. So if you reread and read short stories and you're analyzing those as practice, you're used to looking at those things as a whole rather than trying to analyze the whole, like an entire novel when they only give you an excerpt, if that makes sense. And when you're practicing with that, you want to make sure that you are reading and analyzing literary fiction versus commercial fiction. And actually, I just noticed, which is fantastic, I've written a study guide about how to analyze and look at short fiction like an AP scholar. So after this, if you want to take a peek at that and look at some things that I've written about that, that'll be great. It may be good for you. But either way, you want to make sure you're doing literary fiction. I like to think of fiction as being on kind of a spectrum. Although, and it doesn't mean it's good or bad. So there's a spectrum, there's literary on one side and commercial on the other side. So literary fiction is a lot of the stuff that you read in your AP classes, you read in English class. It tends to be a little more serious. It tends to make you feel bad in the end, honestly. Not always, but it kind of does. It's all the sad stuff. Versus commercial fiction is kind of what I like to think. I like to read this on my porch or at the beach. And after I finish reading it, I usually feel good. And another way to think of it is that you are looking at literary fiction as something that makes you face reality and think of it in a different way. Commercial fiction makes you kind of get an escape for reality. So I'm going to give you a list too of also good short stories to read for this. So if you're like, I don't feel like finding the difference between these two things, that's okay. I got a list for you. And I also want to make sure that things that are like sci-fi and fantasy are not necessarily commercial fiction. This can also be literary fiction too. So, okay. I have a theme here today too. I was feeling Majora's Mask. So you're probably asking yourself, cool, I'm going to give myself some short stories. Oh, what am I analyzing? So first and foremost, You are looking at complex relationships. Every single Q2 asks you something, and it may not say it exactly in those words, but they're asking you for a complex relationship and how maybe a theme and a character relate together. It may be a question like, what is the complex relationship between the main character and the other character in this? That was one of the most recent ones. Or what is the complex relationship between the character and his or her society? What is the complex relationship? Describe the relationship between the character and their family. Something is going to be complex in there, and complexity involves something that is out of what is we consider to be normal, or maybe what we consider to be easy. So you're always analyzing some sort of complex relationship. And that doesn't mean, of course, a relationship between people and people. It's like how you relate to something. And so stemming from that, when you're looking at these stories, you're looking at major themes revolving around complex relationships like fatherhood or racism or just there's a million themes I can think of. Love of family. I always like to use family too. So those themes that go into that really tie into those complex relationships. You want to look at how and why literary devices, figurative language, et cetera, all those things support that complex relationship. So that's where your support comes in, where you're looking for those examples from the stories. I'm going funky here. My lighting's getting weird. That's fun. Okay, so that's what you're looking at when you look at your short stories. You're reviewing that. And I'll include a list here, and this is also in, again, my short story study guide. It's on Fiveable. It's free. I'm not plugging myself. I'm actually saying I've written something about this, so you can check it out too. But these are some really good short stories that you can look at for studying and practicing for the Q2. The shortest one on here, usually is the question asked, is probably Story of an Hour. That's about 2 pages long, and most of these can be found online for free because they're public domain, or somebody has made them public domain without someone's permission. So that's fun. Oh, I'm going disco apparently. Let me fix this light. Okay, that did a little bit. Okay, so those are some short stories you can look at. Tip number 2, you want to review and write about novels you've read. So along with those short stories, maybe or you could be in place with the short stories or along with those short stories. You may, even if you've been practicing for the Q3, doing that practice helps you with the Q2. Because your Q2 is an excerpt from a novel or a play. So it's not like you have been doing this for nothing. So you can dissect short excerpts of novels like you would a short story, and that's what you're going to have to do. I strongly suggest to make sure you're looking at drama as well as straight up novel prose, because they do use drama, and they haven't done it in a couple of years, but who knows, they might do it again this year. And it's not like it was 10 years ago that they did that either, as far as I know. So be sure to look at those and kind of do the same thing that you do for the short stories, or what you've been doing for your novels, is looking at those chunks and analyzing them for, again, complex relationships, evidence using literary devices and whatnot. Yeah. It's weird not getting questions yet, but usually I get them later. Okay. Number 3, you want to practice Released Q2s. So if you haven't already done this, I will tell you that collegeboard.org has every release test since at least like 1999. So you can look at past exams and look for the Q2, which is going to be the prose, what you're looking at. So looking at the prose analysis. So go on to collegeboard.org, or even if you type it, usually I don't even go to College Board and look for it. I type it into Google and I say AP Lit released exams, and it'll pop up. You scroll down, you click a link, and then it's got every exam, and it even has commentary, and I'll talk about what to do with those too. So that's one of the best ways you can study too. So if you're just getting your analyzing chops by looking at those short stories and those novels, then really the way to look at the wording and get used to doing what your task is going to be on May 13th or June 2nd is to practice with those sample prompts. So make sure you're looking at the Q2. So I have kind of this in order, depending on how much time you have and how much you are wanting to spend with it. So looking at the samples prompts, the one thing, you can go through a lot of them and look at the prompts and read for patterns of what they're looking for. And one of those patterns, once again, is asking about a complex relationship. So just know that whatever you're going to read, you're going to have to find something complex in it. And go ahead and look at it, because you'll find that pattern. You can also, if you're wanting to just kind of practice just looking through a lot of them and get through a bunch of them, you can practice writing thesis statements for each of the prompts that you find. So if you're like, I don't want to write a whole essay, I have like 4 other AP exams I need to do, then just write thesis statements. Then you can find evidence as support. So practice looking through the prompt and pulling out evidence from the text. The best thing you can do for yourself is to write the whole essay, is to time yourself. Give yourself 45 minutes to read the prompt, write a thesis, get your evidence, and write your essay. So seeing how well you do. Hopefully you've been doing that a little bit already. But make sure some people are not timing themselves. And so by the time it's the exam and when you're not in a classroom setting right now, necessarily, it's harder to time yourself. It's hard to give yourself that pressure. So you want to do that so you're not surprised on exam day. So write that whole essay. Or at least see how long it takes you to read it and write a thesis statement. See how long it takes you to plan. Kind of time yourself on each of those chunks and see what time that takes you to do something well. And then speed it up if you need to. Another thing you can do if you go to College Board is practice scoring sample papers. So you can look at other people's submitted papers. They have samples on there, and you can read what people have done, and you can look at the commentary that the College Board graders have given it. So you know, like it'll have the old grading. It'll say like a 9, 8, between a 0 and a 9. I believe on the last exam, though, they do have the one that's 1 through 6. So that'll be helpful. So looking at what the commentary is for that helps. You can score your own response. You can ask your AP teacher to help you. You can trade with another person. I will say, if you're afraid that your AP teacher has too much work, don't tell them I said this. But they want to help you. So if you do extra work and you write an essay and you say, hey, can you look over this and tell me how I did on it? They're not going to be unhappy with you. Don't be afraid to get your AP teacher to help you if you want them to grade your paper. But if anything else, get your friends to help. So yeah, so that's what you can do. Practice with those release tests is really, really helpful. And then otherwise, in that couple weeks before, so until about next week or so, you can review your literary devices just so you're not kind of stuck. I know that when I want to remember something on an exam, like if I get stuck on trying to remember what the name of a metaphor is, it makes me really frustrated and I forget. So reviewing those literary devices just so you have the names, reviewing vocabulary, writing down new words that you learn, writing sentences with them, practicing with new vocabulary, just the little stuff. That's something helpful you can do for yourself. If you feel like writing an essay right now is stress-inducing and like gives you a lot of anxiety, these are easy little things to do because you've also, again, been doing this all year. And finally, you want to test the logistical stuff. So, and I'll talk a little bit here and then a little bit later on about logistics. So what you want to do as soon as you can, so it could be after this, sometime this week, you want to make sure that you can log into your College Board account and check your info and your email address and whatnot. So the reason why you want to do this now is because if you have trouble with it, then you can contact your teacher, you can contact your testing coordinator at your school, and they can fix it for you. If you wait until the day of, the day before, it's going to be harder and harder. College Board is swamped right now. So just check in and make sure that your email listed will be the one that you get your e-ticket for to take the exam. So just make sure that's an email that you know the password for and you're going to be able to access and you're going to remember it. So just do that. And when you can, the College Board keeps saying that they're going to have a system up for you to test it and see what the interface looks like. As soon as that comes up, and maybe as of now they have done that, but last time I checked they did not, then test the interface and see how it feels and see what it's like to take a picture, all that stuff. So just make sure you check in the logistical stuff. Okay. Let's talk about the week before. So that's like now until about next week. Get my water. So the week before, hopefully not feeling like this, but I think everyone feels like this no matter what before the test. You're like, how did I get here? Crap, I have a week before my exam. Breathe. So it's a week before, what do I do? You want to breathe and repeat and remember to breathe. Remember that breathing slowly relieves anxiety, no matter what, in some way. It may not relieve it a lot, but it does help you think better. Oxygen gets to your brain and you're able to process things better. So just remember to breathe. Remember that you have been, once again, analyzing and writing all year. You have been looking for the things that the Q2 asks you for. So you've been looking at complex relationships. You've been looking at literary devices. You've been looking at fiction. You're going to be great. You're going to do awesome. You got to breathe. You're going to be fine. And this is a crazy time for anybody. So everyone knows that too. The college board knows that. Your teacher knows that. Everyone around you is in the same situation or is in a similar situation, maybe even worse or better. Who knows? But you're going to be fine. You're going to do great. And you also get an extra 5 minutes, so be happy about that. 5 minutes to actually write and then 5 minutes to turn it in. So normally you only get 40 minutes per essay. So that's kind of nice. So the suggestion here of the week before to kind of get that relaxation and to make sure you're breathing, make sure you're just remembering things. My suggestion is to do whatever has been successful for you on tests in the past. So some people love to cram and they do well. I was not that kind of person. I had to relax the week before. My suggestion here is if you're that kind of person is to focus on the smaller stuff, trying to getting just really remembering those things like particular literary devices or vocabulary or maybe just reviewing those prompts and writing thesis statements, just kind of taking it easy if you can. Now your teacher may be assigning you essays to write and you know what, that's their bag too, and that's fine. That's still going to help you. But at this point, it may be better for your brain to just kind of just release it, especially if you've got other exams. So decide where, when, and how you'll take your exam. So once again, I suggest registering for the earlier exam, May 13th. Just to make sure, even if you're like, I'm pretty sure I want to take another month and study, just in case, register for it. You can test it and then you can decide not to take it. You can, but then on June 2nd, you can't do that. So you just want to make sure you can get in there. You also want to just prepare your testing space, and I'll talk about that in a second too. So that's the where you're going to go, like how you're going to prepare that, and then how you'll take your exam. So at this point, you want to decide, all right, am I going to type this or am I going to handwrite it and take pictures of it? So again, go with what you're most comfortable with. What have you been doing all year? Does the computer make you nervous? To have something typed into, I don't know, whatever, or maybe handwriting something is like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. Like, this is going to freak, whatever is going to make you feel the most relaxed, you want to do that. And once again, you want to test the testing website. Just keep testing it and making sure it works and keep signing into your stuff. Just make sure every once in a while to do that. Don't do it obsessively, but like check it at least one time that week before. Yeah, oh good, we got another one. So again, ask questions if you got them. I hope I'm being fairly thorough. I know I'm being kind of general here, but hey, I mean, you're, like I said, you've been doing this stuff all year. So you got this. I'm going to talk about setting up your ideal exam space. So the week before, not the day before, although you want to make sure this happens the day before too, you want to set up what is going to work best for you in an exam. So this is what teachers and testing coordinators have to think about when they're making you take an AP exam to make sure it's secure, but also fair. And the nice thing is that it's going to be fair because you are the only person taking the exam at that time. So you prepare your space. And by that time, I mean in that space. So when you're preparing your space, you want to do this as much as possible and get your parent, guardian, whoever you are living with to help you prepare this space because they need to know what is necessary for you to be able to take a test. This is a very important test to you and you want to make sure that you get the space that you need. You want to focus on comfort and familiarity here. So wherever you have been, well, I'll start with like typing or handwriting. You want to make sure that you're doing whatever you feel the most comfortable doing. So just kind of think about that. Keep that in mind. I know I've heard about 50-50 from people. So whatever you're deciding is the right answer, whatever you want to do. Decide what device you want to use. I would say test out the site on any particular devices that you have. If you've got kind of weird reception, then maybe a smartphone is better for you, or a tablet. Or if you're fine and you need to be at a space like at a desk and making sure you're doing that, be at a computer. I'm more comfortable with computers than I am with doing something on my smartphone because my smartphone is a piece of crap, but my computer is much better. So yeah, You want to focus on comfort and familiarity. My recommendation for that as well is to, wherever you've been doing your homework might be the place where you take your test, because your brain is now wired to work there. And so you have been, and you may have noticed this when you're taking tests in class, like if you end up sitting in a different seat than what you normally do for a test, you may not remember stuff as well. So if you've been doing your work like at a particular desk all of this time that you've been home, then maybe that's the place that you're going to do your work. This is not necessary, and it doesn't mean, again, that if you move places, you're going to fail the test. That's not going to happen. No, it just might mean that you will feel more comfortable in that space because you are psychologically attuned to doing work in that space. It's whatever works for you. You want to make this space as distraction-free as possible. So you want to check and make sure you got internet access in that space, so it's pretty good. And as much as possible, I am so sorry if you've got a little brother or sister, you've got a crazy dog, you've got all kinds of stuff, try to keep them out of there. I know that is not entirely possible for some people. Hopefully your parents or your guardians or whoever you're living with is going to help you in that case, because again, give yourself an hour space to be able to have a quiet space if you can. You want to clean it too. You don't want to work in a dirty space just because you want to clear out as many distractions as possible, and having a messy space is not going to help. And then as far as I said before, this is open note. So you can have any notes, materials, or anything that you plan to use ready and organized. Now, if you're thinking, when I say that, you're like, wait a minute, what do you mean notes? If you're thinking that, don't worry about it. Don't use notes. I wouldn't put any notes because it would make me nervous. But for some people, like, yes, I get to use my notes. You might want to use things like, if you're going to use notes for the AP exam, and the reason why I say that too is because AP Lit is a skills-based exam, so you may not be, you may not need, your skill is to write an essay on the prompt that you're given. So you don't necessarily have to memorize something. You can still describe what something is without knowing exactly what the word is for it. You have a text in front of you that you're analyzing, so it's a skill of an analysis. So you don't need outside materials to take this exam. And if that makes you like nervous, freak out, don't use it. I think the only materials I can think that someone might want would be maybe a thesaurus or a dictionary, or their notes on literary devices, or not even like your vocabulary journal if you've been keeping that. But you don't want anything that makes you lose time. So whatever you're using as notes and materials, just make sure that whatever it is saves you time and does not take you time to look through it. So focus on the writing, not looking at materials. But if you have those things, make sure they're ready to go and you're not kind of rushing around scrambling for those things in the last minute. Okay. So yeah, that's preparing your ideal exam space. And I'm not going to tell you what that is because it might be a desk for you. It might be laying on the floor for you. It might be going outside. Outside is kind of risky, but if you got a really quiet space outside, more power to you. Just make sure you got internet and make sure you can write things. Okay, let's talk about the final day. And we're so small today. I'm used to having so many questions. So again, if you got questions, ask them. But if I don't have any questions, I don't have any questions. It's fine. All right, we're on the final day, from day before and the day of. Here we go. Oh my gosh, it's the day before. What do I do? Once again, you got to breathe. And then repeat, and then breathe again, and then breathe, repeat. Okay, so you want to allow your brain to rest on this last day, especially, you probably got other classes and some of you have other AP exams you got to do. I wouldn't at this point try to squeeze in another practice test or two. If you can, and this might not be even like the day before, this could be the week before, you can ask. I know that the school that I'm working with is, you can request your teachers, they have it so other classes don't give them work on that day that they're taking the AP exam. So if you haven't asked and you're like, you're worried about that, you can ask your teacher to do that. They will usually understand, but the answer will always be no if you don't ask. So as much as you possibly can, allow your brain to rest 24 hours before. Don't try to squeeze in another practice test. Again, unless that has been successful for you and you love doing that and that works. But I don't suggest it. I suggest letting your brain kind of relax and be able to absorb the information for the next day. Read a book you like. Do something that makes you happy. Test the testing site again. make your final preparations for your test space. So just make sure it's in order, what you need. You want to organize your materials. So items that you might want for the testing is extra paper, especially if you're handwriting. But I might want extra paper anyway, just to be able to write planning on if you're that kind of person. Some of you are, some of you aren't. So it's whatever works for you. If you are handwriting, you want to have extra blue or black pens. You still got to do blue or black ink so they can see it. And if you got highlighters, if you're able to have the exam, I'm not sure if you can print it. I think we're still trying to figure that out. But having highlighters maybe for your own writing, you can have that. And then any backup devices, just in case one thing craps out, then maybe having something there like the minutes before or something, and your computer craps out, then have your tablet try to sign into that. And then any references that you plan to have. But again, you don't need references. This is a skill test. You will not need that. And so that's it. That's studying for the AP Lit exam and looking at those final tips and tricks. This is a weird year, y'all. It is very strange. It would be different if it were any other time, but at least, again, you're only doing one part of the test, so you have a little less to study and a little less to work with. Yeah. And this is, again, the first time I haven't had any questions, so any questions from anybody? I know this is also weird because Crowdcast was being a little funky today. Okay. Well, if we don't have any questions, so I will say that this will be, as usual, available tomorrow, at least 24, or within 24 hours from now, so that will be ready for you to look at. I'm also going to include some materials as far as how to a sheet that how to analyze short stories. And again, a plug for if you're looking at short stories and you want to get a little in-depth look at them, then to go into that study guide on Fiveable. Again, all free. The replay is free. Everything is free. It's fantastic. And if you got any questions, don't hesitate to come to Fiveable and we will help you out. Breathe, my friends. You're going to do fantastically on this test. I'm excited to see what you do. And I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful night and week. Bye.